You know that feeling when you walk into a room to get something, and then the minute that you walk into that room, you completely forgot why you were there in the first place? Or when you're trying to do a task that is pretty simple, like maybe packing up the diaper bag to get you and the baby out of the house, but for some reason it feels like your brain is having to work double time just to remember everything that you need. Like, you know that feeling when it's like, wow, all of my brain cells are having to get involved in this really simple task that for some reason feels super taxing. This is called brain fog, otherwise known as mummy brain. And if you've ever experienced it, first of all, I want to say that you are not alone. Second of all, I want to say that you are not losing your mind. It is very common. I have experienced it after having my daughter, and I still experience it sometimes now, over 3 years postpartum. But I also want to share today some research-backed tips, 5 tips, 5 things that you can do to help reduce and mitigate that brain fog or that mummy brain that can be really common, especially in that early postpartum phase. But really, anytime after you have a baby, mummy brain can really affect us. So let's take a look at what we can do to help it. But before we get into it, if you are a regular here, then hey girl, pull up a chair. It's so good to have you here again. And if you are new here, hey and welcome. I hope you stick around. My name is Mayfair Clements. I am a postpartum care specialist. I am passionate about seeing mothers get the support that they need to manage one of the most difficult and steep learning curves and life transitions that anyone will ever experience and go through. I'm passionate about talking about things that we all experience as mothers, but because they're not talked about enough, we sometimes feel like we're abnormal, or we sometimes feel like there's something wrong with us, when actually as a society we just haven't done a good job at reassuring mums that, like, hey, these are the things that you can expect after you have a baby. Here are how vast the changes can be after you have a baby, and here are some tools that can help you cope with that massive life change. So that's what this channel is all about. So if that sounds like your jam, if you are a new mom, or if you're pregnant, or maybe even if you're a seasoned mom but you're still wanting tips to navigate this life transition like I am. Like I said, I'm 3 years postpartum, and there are still things that I'm experiencing and ways that I've changed as a new mom since having my daughter, and I need resources for that, and I need tools for that. So if that sounds like your jam, make sure you stick around, make sure you subscribe as well, and turn on your notifications. I post new videos here every single Friday. So yeah, if that sounds like your vibe, then go ahead and subscribe. But let's get into it. I want to dive into 5 things that you can do to reduce the effects of brain fog or mummy brain. But before we get into that, you guys know me, I always want to kind of set a stage to help us to understand why this happens in the first place. And I think this is important because it's going to help you to realize that you're not crazy. You're not losing your mind. You're not experiencing early stages of Alzheimer's. You're just a new mom, right? So let's talk a bit about why brain fog or mummy brain happens, especially in those early postpartum days. So the first reason that we tend to experience this brain fog after just having a baby is the hormonal changes that you experience. During pregnancy, estrogen and progesterone, they are rising, and then after you have a baby, these hormones drop, and that has a massive impact on our memory, our emotional regulation, our executive function, the parts in our brain that are really responsible for remembering things and retaining information. When our hormones are making this steep decline, it really affects our brain and how much we can actually hold on to. So that is the first reason. And again, a lot of what I talk about is geared towards that early postpartum phase. But even if you are out of that postpartum phase and you are, back to experiencing like your regular menstrual cycle, we have changes in our hormones throughout the month, and you'll notice that at different points in your cycle, like especially in the luteal phase, you'll notice a little bit more of this brain fog as well when our levels of estrogen and progesterone are changing. So that is the number one reason. You are not going crazy. You are just experiencing a very steep hormonal shift. It is the biggest and the fastest hormonal shift that anyone will ever experience in a lifetime. So if you imagine, that shift that happens when you go through puberty and the way that you feel like your brain is completely changing. That happens over the course of a couple of years. But if you imagine that a hormonal change just as big is happening after you have a baby, but in a much more condensed time, it can then help you to understand, okay, like, let me give myself a little bit of grace. Like, my brain, my hormones are literally rewiring. The second thing that can really have an impact on brain fog is sleep deprivation. I have said this on this channel before, and if you haven't checked out my video on I think it's 7 tips that I share, or 7 things to do if you've had a rough night with your newborn, I will link it up here. In that video I really talk about, you know, how sleep deprivation affects literally everything, but it really affects our brain, and it really affects our ability to retain information and to get things done. When we're sleep deprived, that's when you end up with that feeling of, you know, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, where you're trying to do something that seems simple, like pack a diaper bag, but it feels like you're literally performing neurosurgery because your brain is just not, you're not rested enough, you're not getting, you know, the amount of sleep that you usually would be, because, you know, you're waking up in the middle of the night every 3 hours, every couple of hours to feed a baby. So sleep deprivation is another main factor that has a huge impact on our brain's capacity and can really cause some of those brain fog symptoms. The third thing, and there are many reasons, but I kind of just want to talk about a few of them, really for the purposes of, if you are watching this, just to kind of let you exhale and make you realize, like, whew, wait, like, I'm not going crazy, like, there's nothing wrong with me. There are all of these factors and things that are at play that are affecting my ability to focus and do tasks that otherwise seem easy, but right now in this season feel a little bit more difficult. So that's why I want to share some of these reasons. But the third thing is just that change in focus, like, especially if you're a first-time mum, it is a massive adjustment having to go from basically being responsible for taking care of yourself and keeping yourself alive to now being responsible for taking care of a tiny human being who basically relies on you for their survival. And what happens is, it's like your brain focuses all of its energy towards keeping this tiny human being alive, and you'll find that your brain ends up fixating on things related to your baby, directly related to your baby, like maybe it's feeding times or how long have they been awake for, but everything is like a give and a take, or a push and a pull. So if your brain is retaining more of that information, and think about it, like your brain before, it didn't have to think about, you know, feeding times, it didn't have to think about, you know, how many scoops of formula to put in the water, it didn't have to think about, you know, pumping and a pumping schedule, but now it does, and it almost has to borrow that energy from somewhere else. So that's sometimes your brain will borrow that energy from things like, you know, remembering to get eggs at the grocery store, trying to recall the ingredients that go into that soup that you love. Like, your brain almost has to borrow the energy from somewhere else that you are now having to use to think about all of the moving parts to keep this new, vulnerable, tiny human being alive. Okay, so now that we understand and have gone over some of the things that actually cause brain fog, let's talk about a few things that you can actually do to mitigate the impacts of brain fog or mummy brain, especially if you're in that postpartum period. You guys know we love to keep it practical here, so I'm going to be sharing 5 practical things that you can do today to help you if you're experiencing brain fog or mummy brain. So the first thing, and it's very, very simple, maybe sounds a little bit elementary, but it is game changing, and it is to do one thing at a time. There is a myth, especially as women, that, oh, women are great at multitasking. But the truth is, science has proven time and time again, none of us can multitask. None of us are very good at multitasking. So when we think we're doing 2 things at once, when we think we are putting away the laundry and we're also in our head planning what tasks or activities we're going to do to engage our newborn tomorrow, actually what the brain is doing is just switching back and forth from those 2 tasks. And that switch is very mentally taxing, and you end up being less effective, or you end up being less effective at doing those things than if you just did one thing and then did the other thing. And 2, it just doesn't feel as good. And I get the temptation. I often fall into this temptation of feeling like I'm doing a million things at once. Like just the other day, I felt like, you know, when you have like a bunch of things that you need to do, it was like, okay, well, I need to clean up the kitchen, I need to get dinner cooked, I need to get my toddler ready for bed. So I ended up finding myself in a place where I was doing a little bit of each. Like I was like cleaning the surface of the kitchen, but I was also going to my, my daughter's bedroom to like put the books out that she wanted to read. And I was just doing three things all at the same time. And I could feel myself like, oh, wait, this is feeling super overwhelming. So what I did was I just took a step back and I was like, okay, I'm just going to do one thing first. I'm going to clean the kitchen first. And then when that's done, I'm going to start cooking dinner. And then when dinner's done, I'm going to get my toddler ready for bed. And it just feels way lighter, and it feels lighter, right? Like you're still going to have to do all of those things that you may be thinking about doing. But when you just take your time to do one thing at a time, it's going to reduce that feeling of like mental clutter and not being able to think straight. So just take a step back right now and ask yourself, okay, what's the one thing that I can do right now? Focus on doing that thing, take it off your to-do list, and only then move on to the next thing. Multitasking, it does not work. I'm a big fan of something like, for example, listening to a podcast while you're cooking or listening to music, doing something like that to kind of make an activity feel more engaging. But I am talking about doing two things that require our mental capacity or even our physical capacity. It just doesn't work, and it's going to make you feel even more overwhelmed and even more flustered than if you just took the time to complete one task and then moved on to the next task. So, pack up the baby's diaper bag and then get the baby changed. Don't try and do both of those two things at once. Just do one thing and then the other. And this is going to massively reduce that brain fog feeling. Now, the second thing that you can do to reduce brain fog is very closely linked to the first thing actually, which is just to simply write things down. I am a big proponent for taking things out of your head and putting them on paper, because again, with that example that I gave where I was like trying to do three things at once, I was trying to cook dinner, I was trying to clean, I was trying to get my toddler ready. Part of the reason that we do that, even on a subconscious level, is especially like when you're so sleep deprived, like, and you're keeping everything in your brain, is like we're afraid that if we don't start on this little task, we'll forget it or we'll lose it. But when we write those things down, it kind of just helps to organize our thoughts and allows us to go through it process by process in an order that makes sense. So I have a digital weekly planner, which I will leave the link for that in the description, which you can check out. And that is personally what I use to write down all of the tasks that I need to do on the front of the end of the week. But it also allows you to, like, throughout the day, add tasks based off of categories. But even if you don't have a fancy planning system, just having like a scrap piece of paper that you write things down. And this is actually something that I've recently gone back to. For the most part, I'm a digital girly, but I found that just literally carrying around a notepad and paper for writing things down that I don't want to, I prefer digital for things that I want to refer back to. But for something like a shopping list, or for something like a quick to-do list of things that I want to do in the hour that my daughter might be napping, just having a scrap piece of paper really helps. Like that physical act of writing something down and putting it on paper, it's less for my brain to hold, and instead I'm like, okay, cool, that piece of paper is holding what my brain has to do. So even if I don't get this task done right now, it's written down somewhere, I can always come back to it. So if you're experiencing brain fog right now, that's a simple step that I want you to take, is just to get into the habit of writing things down. If you ever find yourself where you're like overwhelmed, there's like a million and one things that are on your mind to do. Maybe it's clean the pump parts, but also you want to start prepping for dinner, you want to put away the baby clothes, whatever it is, take a step back, just do a brain dump of all of those things that are in your mind to do, put them down on a list, and then just slowly start working your way through that list. Or sometimes when we write those things down, we realize that, wait, maybe this thing isn't as urgent as it felt before, and maybe it can just be crossed off, or maybe it can wait until a later time. But with brain fog or mummy brain, it happens partly because our brains are trying to hold so many things at once. So simply outsourcing some of that thinking to a piece of paper or whatever digital planning system, it could be the Notes app on your iPhone, just those little things are going to help our brains have less to carry and less to hold, and we can actually focus our mental energy on doing the thing. You could even have something like a diaper checklist that you hang up somewhere, that you kind of just go through each time you're leaving the house. Like, okay, do I have my wipes ticked? Do I have my diapers ticked? Do I have a burp cloth? Do I have my formula packed? And just taking those things out of your brain and just having those as a to-do list that you can quickly run through before you leave the door, so you're not having to hold that information, can be a massive game changer for that brain fog or that mummy brain. Now, here's the third step that you can take if you're experiencing brain fog or mummy brain, and that is to reprioritize self-care. A lot of the factors that contribute to brain fog are just those hormonal shifts that naturally happen after you have a baby. And especially if you're kind of outside of that like really early postpartum phase, brain fog or mummy brain, forgetting things, finding it really hard to do simple tasks, could just be a sign that you are at capacity and that your brain and your body is craving more nurturing and more love. And I know how easy it is in motherhood, like when so much of our time is taken up by taking care of a little one. It's so easy that like, okay, when they go to bed, let me just squeeze in one more productive thing. Let me just clean the house. Let me just declutter this. Let me just send this email. Let me just get ahead of this work task, because it's like, when else are you going to do it, right? But if we continue to do that for a long time, instead of using that time to prioritize our self-care, things like whatever it is that makes you feel good, like running a warm bath, watching a show, it slowly drains out our battery and it slowly chips away at our ability to focus. It slowly chips away at our ability to give ourselves the tasks that we do need to do. It's like constantly using your phone instead of like plugging it into your charger. Yeah, for that time that your phone's charging, you may not be able to use it because it's plugged to a wall. But if you take the time to charge it, you wake up tomorrow and you have a phone with full battery and you can take it out on the go with you without worrying that it's going to run out on you. And our bodies work very much in the same way. Self-care is kind of like plugging yourself back into that battery. And if you're here right now and you're watching this and you know that you are in a place of burnout, like you don't even know where to start right now, I highly recommend taking the Mama Reset quiz. It is designed for exactly that. It basically takes you through a bunch of questions and they act as kind of a diagnostic to help you figure out, okay, where are you feeling most depleted right now? What is overwhelming you most right now? Is it your home? Is it your wardrobe? Is it your physical self-care? Maybe you just need some physical rest. It helps you to figure out what that thing actually is. And then it gives you a personalized reset path with tasks, practical activities that I have curated myself from my work as a life coach working with new moms that work to help you to reset in a way that is sustainable and in a way that doesn't feel super heavy. It's not like another PDF that you're going to download and not use, because this is based off of where you actually are at, because you answer these questions and it helps me to figure out, okay, here's where you're needing, here's your number one task that's going to make you feel more reset. So if you want to check that out, you can go to the link in the description, or you can go to makingamother.net/quiz. It takes 2 minutes to do. It's completely free, but it's really going to help you to figure out, okay, what is my path for resetting? What is my path for self-care? But regardless, if you're experiencing brain fog, I highly recommend just putting in pockets of self-care. It doesn't have to be huge things. It could just be like in the middle of the afternoon, making sure you get a coffee break, or at the end of the day, like or while your baby's napping, like maybe you do want to get stuff done and that would really help you, but maybe just taking 5 minutes of that time to just take a seat, have a breather. Yeah, brain fog, all of these things can be signs that actually our bodies are just asking us to slow down a bit and reprioritize that self-care and filling back our own cups. So here's the fourth thing that you can implement today if you're experiencing brain fog or mummy brain. And I'm going to tell you up front, this is going to be the hardest one to implement, but possibly the most impactful one to implement. And that is to stop scrolling. I know. It's so intuitive. We constantly have our phones, and it can often feel like we reach for our phones because we need a mental break, right? Like we often scroll on TikTok or Instagram or YouTube Shorts or whatever it is because we're like, oh my gosh, like this is gonna help the mental clutter that I'm feeling. I just need a break. I just need something that's gonna make me laugh. I just need to be entertained for a bit. But what that actually does when we scroll during these pockets of lull time, maybe when you're waiting to check out at the grocery store, or maybe your baby's playing, like you're scrolling on your phone, what it actually does is it drains our energy and it actually reduces our mental capacity. Because even when we think, okay, I'm just scrolling, I'm just being entertained, our brains are being forced to process the information that we're actually looking through. And our brains are actually being forced to make a decision. Like, it could be, is this funny? Like, should I forward this to my husband? Should I apply this information? And that time, those little bits of lull time, instead of scrolling, we could actually be using those just to allow our brains to kind of turn off just a little bit. So it's going to feel weird at first, like, because it's so natural, right? Like, you know, you're waiting for the pot to boil, you go on your phone and you scroll, whatever it is. But those little pockets of time are pockets that your brain could be using just to slow down, right? So you may be asking, okay, what do I replace my scroll time with? I mean, the first thing you could replace it with is doing absolutely nothing. Just getting into the habit of, if you have a moment where you're waiting for something, just do nothing. Like, just take a deep breath, allow yourself to be bored for a bit. And what that does is it recharges our mental battery and it increases our mental capacity, and it's going to reduce some of that brain fog. The second thing that you can do, because I understand it can be hard to kind of just take away something that's so habitual, is instead of scrolling, use that time to read through scripture. It may not be practical to have like your whole Bible out, but even just going on like the Bible app or just meditating on the verse of the day can be really, really helpful, because in the Bible it talks about, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of our minds. And our minds can't be renewed if we're not in the word. Our minds can't be transformed. Our lives can't be transformed by the word if we are not in it. So it could be really impactful to actually use that time that you would be scrolling to just replace it with getting yourself back into scripture. And the beautiful thing about God is he actually renews our mind. Like, it doesn't even have to be reading through scripture. It could be using that time to just pray and ask God, like, give me the grace for this season, or give me the grace to be able to remember the things that I need to remember and to let go of the things that I don't need to remember in this season. But trying as hard as we can to reduce the amount of time that we spend scrolling is going to massively reduce that brain fog, because we don't realize, like, it feels like entertainment scrolling on our phones. It doesn't feel like we're working hard. But I notice this a lot whenever I'm reaching for my phone more often. There's a direct correlation for me. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure if you took a true heart check, sis, like, you'd find the same thing. But for me, there is a direct correlation between how much I'm scrolling and how mentally clear that I actually feel. So try and reduce that scrolling as much as possible, and try and replace it, if you can, with reading scripture or just praying. And a practical thing could just be like putting your phone somewhere else, right? Like, even if for me, I'm guilty of doing this, like when I cook, I'm like, okay, like, let me just scroll through my phone. But actually just putting my phone away somewhere else really helps me. And we need that white space. Like, we need that time where our minds aren't doing anything. We need that time where we're not processing and taking in more information for us to make decisions about, and where we're just kind of being and breathing and allowing ourselves to have that minute to just recalibrate. So here is the final thing that you can do to reduce brain fog or mummy brain. And it's something that I mention often, but again, it's one of the hardest things to get, but that is to get more rest. I get it, in the season, sleep feels like such a scarce commodity. Again, especially if you're in that stage with a newborn where you're having to feed them every 3 hours, every couple of hours. It can be really hard to get sleep right at night. There may be nothing that you can do about that in that season, but have a look at where you can find other opportunities to rest. And notice that I didn't say get more sleep. Ideally, yes, get more sleep, but sometimes it's not possible to get more sleep, but we can get more rest. So it's just looking at your day, especially if you've had a particularly tough night. Have a look at what in your day could just be dialed down to allow you to have a little bit more rest time. So like I spoke about in the video about if you've had a rough night with your newborn, about the fact that, like, so for example, if you have a mummy and me class set up, like a social thing, like with you, your baby, and like some other mums, maybe that is what you need. But maybe, especially if you're an introvert like me, what you need could be just going outside and taking a walk with just you and your baby, and that would feel more restful and rejuvenative to you. You may not be the type of person who can nap during the day, which was very much like me in the early days. I remember feeling so tired, but I couldn't nap. But just being horizontal, allowing yourself to use that, just because you're not sleeping or napping, that doesn't mean you can't use that time to kind of just rest and do something that feels good to you, like read a book, read your Bible. So find little ways to get more rest, because at the end of the day, our brains don't work very well when they are not rested. Like, that's the simple truth about it, which is also a reason why I want you to give yourself grace during this season as well. I really just recommend, like, especially if you're in those first couple of weeks and months, is don't put pressure on yourself to pick up a bunch of extra projects and things like that, because your brain is already working so hard to keep this tiny human being alive on such little sleep. So asking yourself, like, what kind of things can wait, to allow yourself to just have that time to rest and to recuperate. So as much as possible, try and allow yourself to have more rest. If you have people, if you have a village that can support you, like, bring in the troops. If you have a husband that can take some of those night feedings and allow you to get a full night's rest, do that. If you have a best friend, if you have a mother, like, do whatever you can to try and get more rest. It's going to be the most impactful thing that you can do, not just for brain fog and not just for mummy brain, but the most impactful thing that you can do even for your mental health during this postpartum period. So I can't tell you enough, do whatever you can to try and get more rest. I understand, like, you need to feed your baby at night. Like, I understand you may have a baby who has colic, you may have a baby who's cluster feeding. Of course, that's your priority, is making sure that your baby gets what they need. But outside of that, ask yourself what can come off of your to-do list to allow yourself some more time to rest. What can you say no to allow yourself a little bit of time just to sit on the couch and do nothing, or to sit on the couch and watch a show, whatever it is, but just find more ways to get rest. And you're going to notice that this has a massive impact on your mental health. I highly recommend too, again, it all depends, like, if you're exclusively breastfeeding and you're really committed to that, this may not be practical. But I remember for me, I think it was around 2 weeks after my daughter was born, we had just come back from the hospital, and I found it really hard to sleep I don't know how anyone sleeps in the hospital, honestly. Like, the bright lights, the beeping monitors, it was a lot. And I hadn't had more than like 2 hours of sleep at a time in like over a week, and I felt like I was literally losing my mind. And I remember my husband, like, bless him, he was so sweet. He was like, okay, my mum came over as well, so she was with the baby, but I still found that my mind was just kind of racing. And my husband, he made up this like silly counting game to help my mind wind down to rest. And I had the first full night of sleep that I had like since I had my daughter, and I felt like a new person. I felt like my brain had literally rewired. So if you're in that place where you're really struggling with brain fog or even your mental health, it could be that all you need is one really, really good night of sleep. So see what you can do to try and get that in tonight. I hope you found those 5 tips useful. I hope that you pick at least one of those that you can apply today to help you. I know it's tough. It can almost feel like you're losing yourself, like when you're experiencing this brain fog, but I can promise you that it does get better, especially if you're intentional about prioritizing those things that we spoke about, like rest, self-care, all of those things. So thank you so much for watching this video, and if you made it this far, one thing I know about you is you're a real one. And one thing I know about you is that we're going to get on really, really well, and I would love to connect outside of these videos. And the best way that you can do that is by signing up to my newsletter. I send out an email every single week, usually on a Thursday, sometimes a different day, but I send you out an email once a week, and like it's just a really fun email, usually just sharing like a lesson that I'm learning in my motherhood journey. I share like favorite things that I'm enjoying, whether it's like a recipe or crafts that I'm trying with my toddler. I share pictures that I don't share anywhere else because I'm not really on Instagram. I just find it to be a bit of an overwhelming place and a time suck. But my email list is really the place that I feel like I can just really talk to you guys from the heart. And I also read and reply to every single email. As of right now, I have the capacity to do that. So yeah, if you're wanting to have a back and forth conversation with me, then you can go ahead and sign up to my newsletter. I love it because it kind of feels like, you know, we're besties. It kind of feels like we're texting. I get to let you know what's on my heart. You can let me know what's on your heart. And it's just a really good time. So you can sign up for that using the link below, or you can just go to makingamother.net/newsletter. But again, thank you guys so much for being here, for watching, and just for supporting this channel. You guys make it so easy to show up on here every single week. So yeah, I just appreciate the love. I appreciate the comments. I appreciate, even if you're not able to comment, like maybe you're watching this and you're driving or listening to this, hopefully don't be watching this while you're driving, focus on the road, okay? But yeah, I just really appreciate the support, and it means more than you know, because I love this work and you guys are giving me the ability to do it. So thank you guys. I love you. I appreciate you, and thank you for watching.